Hi, I'm Don. Today's resin casted miniature is from Fenris Games. Today we're painting with all Army Painter paints. We're painting with Speedpaints 1.0, 2.0, and Warpaints Air. Initially, I wanted this to be Grimdark and muted, but alas, it's Grimpop. By the way, watch until the end of the video for our tip time. Hi, I'm Don. Welcome to my studio. This channel is supported by all these awesome brands. And of course, this channel won't be possible without the support of my patrons. I started painting this miniature roughly around almost a couple of weeks ago. And at that time, I only had Speedpaints 1.0. You can see in the video right now that I kinda tested the reactivation of the Speedpaints 1.0. And it was kinda interesting in a way because I let the speed paint dry a bit before I blended the edges. And that was a bit tricky. Tricky because it's not really that easy to reactivate. You really have to rub the paint and like moisturize or like reactivate it with water. But at the end of the day, I had to rub it a bit. So working a little bit faster, not letting the paint dry a bit, and blending the edges after applying the paint is more recommended. I mean, what you see here is that I'm rubbing the edges. Like there's a little bit of effort just to blend these edges. As you could see, I shifted to my dry brush, red grass dry brush, so that I could apply more pressure. So I would recommend that you don't allow it to dry. You blend it, like you blend the paint almost immediately after applying it. Unlike here, I'm blending it while it's almost already dry. I had to blend the edges here because I want to transition to this next color. I chose a lighter gray color because initially the intention was to make this really muted, like not too colorful as usual, like as usual of my work. So I started with runic gray thinking that I can paint muted colors. But at last, at the end, I ended up with a very colorful Cthulhu as expected. Also, I chose this miniature which is pretty big to see how the speed paints flow over all the surface of the miniature. And it flowed. It really flowed well. Although you have to be a little bit quick, similar to contrast paints, you have to like apply a really good amount of paint so that you won't produce coffee stains. Although, since we're using Speedpaints 1.0 and as you saw earlier in the video, you could still rub the edges off with water so that you don't have coffee stains. After this base painting, I actually set this aside for more than a week and I painted other miniatures. Then, the Speedpaints 2.0 package arrived yesterday. Also today, we're using the reusable membrane or wet palette paper from Redgrass so that the speed paints won't really stain the foam, at least not as much if we use a disposable paper. Now we're using Speedpaints 2.0. I think, I'm not really sure, I have to really observe this next time, but the Speedpaints 2.0 dries a little bit faster than the old version. Also, I know that this version 2.0 will not reactivate, so I did not like do what I did earlier in the video wherein I let the paints dry and then blended the edges. In this one, right after applying, I'm blending the edges if I cannot apply a very rich coat all over the model. So this model is so big, you can't really apply in one flow, in one application. So what I did, I applied in sections and then blended the edges so that I don't have coffee stains. Now you'll see in this video that I did not blend the algae green towards the Crusader skin in this wing part because you'll see later that I'll blend it with a different color. Now we're finished with the basic base colors of this Cthulhu. Now we're going to apply some lighter colors. Way back before I used to do like speed paints, I don't like the look of like the highlight colors are basically pale white-ish. So I don't really like that look. So you see here I'm using lighter colors to stain those highlight areas. So after applying the darker algae green and like Crusader skin, you see now that we're kind of filtering with the lighter colors. By filtering, I mean we're kind of eliminating the white-ish highlights that we produced earlier. Also, I'm using these lighter colors to blend in between the other colors you could see here in the wings. I'm kind of using it as a transition color towards the other colors of the model. Like transition the green skin towards the normal skin color. Here, this color is super nice. It kinda eliminated the white-ish highlights of the Crusader skin, which you may like in other models. But with this one, I'm going for a Grimdark-ish look. But again, I failed and ended up with Grimpop. So basically, this batch of speed paint colors are eliminating the whitish highlights and making the whole model a little bit darker. And because it will be a little bit darker, my highlights later will pop a bit more. You see, I prefer doing my highlights with regular paints because I like to produce texturing or textures while I paint the highlights. So I want the other side of the model to have a bigger or no, brighter source of light, and I don't want to do value sketching with the regular brush. So now we're dry brushing some highlights on the left side of the model. I use skeleton bone because I don't want this like part of the painting to be too bright. I don't want it to be too stark because if I end up with like using white or off-white, it will be too bright. And that means I'll be applying more paints or more speed paints to tone it down. Now to speed up the process, we're using an airbrush. With this one, I thinned down these colors with a little bit of medium. This blue color, I mix roughly around 2 parts paint and 1 part medium. And just painted it around the edges of the initial colors that we painted on the wave. And then with my easy yellow, this one, I definitely like thinned down roughly around 1 part medium and 1 part paint and painted it over the left side of the model. This will be our like main source of light, which is basically yellowish sunlight. You could use your monster brush to apply these colors and this filtering, but I decided to use an airbrush to speed up the drying time and basically speed up the whole painting process of this part of the painting. Now it's simply adding more highlights, especially on the top left area of the model to really like give a good look that the main source of light is from the top left. And this time we're using Warpaint, so I did a lot of mixing because I only have the starter set and I had to mix a lot of colors like mix white and yellow so that I have an ice yellow basically. So I had to mix a lot of colors, but it was kind of fun to do highlighting with Warpaints Air. Since these airbrush paints are pre-thinned for airbrush use already, it has the perfect consistency for highlighting. Of course, you have to wick your brush so that you have more control, but since it's pre-thinned, you just have to focus with the mixing of the colors and not the actual thinning when you are about to paint the colors. Now let's paint the eyes. I just painted it with familiar pink and highlighted with ice yellow. Now we're applying the final shades. You could apply as many final shades or as many colors as you want so that you have really nice color depth. But be aware that these speed paints are kind of transparent, and transparent colors kind of react to each other differently. They usually react very nicely, like you have really nice transitions in between the colors, but it's a little bit unpredictable, of course. And now we're glazing a little bit of green. Again, as I've said, I can't really like stick to my muted Grimdark look that I initially wanted. So my ending is like Grimpop. Now to finish off the model, we're doing a little bit of recess painting. You could also use dark purple or very dark blue. But with this one, I wanted a bluish tint to my recesses. So I used this turquoise color. And it turned out really nice. Now I think I'm calling this done. This was a really quick 4 hour, maybe 5 hours of painting. And I'm very happy with the result. Now, before I reveal, a ton of thanks to all my patrons, because without my patrons, this channel won't be possible. Now it's time for tip time. Basically, what Army Painter says, if you're painting with speed paints, you start with the lightest color. But you saw here that we did not like really do that because some colors, or basically like 90% of speed paints, are semi-transparent. They're practically transparent. So since they're practically transparent, you could really layer them on top of each other without really starting with the lightest color. However, you have a little bit more control if you start from light to dark. I'm still familiarizing like the look or the colors of Speed Paints 2.0, and I noticed that there are like maybe 3 or 4 colors that are a little bit more opaque, has an opaque finish, which is great, but we'll maximize those properties as we learn more with like the other colors in this set, which is this is the complete set. I have the complete set and I have to like learn all of those colors. So even though I kind of failed again, like doing a grim dark muted finish, but I do think because we use a lot of purple shades at the end, which I did not show you in on video, and a little bit of final shades and glazes, and of course our highlights are a little bit muted as usual because ice yellow is like not really that colorful, we ended up with a very moody painting, which I think may not be grimdark or may not be muted, but I think the atmosphere or the look of the model is pretty grim. So basically, this video showed you that you don't really need to start with muted colors. If you really want to mute the colors and tone them down, you simply add like shades that are complementary to those colors. Like for example, the wing part, since it's reddish, you could use greenish shade so that it tones down to a darker and muted color. That's it, Pansit. I hope you like this video and watch these other videos.